Hello, this is your brain on drugs, and this is the punk rock psychiatrist. All right, so continuing with my obesity medicine series, today I'm getting into something that I'm probably one of the most passionate things for me, and that is the topic of lifestyle medicine. So I'm going to talk about all the different aspects of lifestyle medicine. We're going to start with diet nutrition today. I'm going to probably have like 6 episodes on that topic alone. We'll talk about fitness. We'll talk about the other aspects, and um, I'll talk about this. This is a topic that kind of overreaches many things. So I put it into this obesity medicine topic, but this is something that you can use for medical health, losing weight, mental health. I'll talk about some specific studies. The studies I'm going to talk about when I get to that episode will be specifically how changing your diet and exercise can affect your mental health. So, this is a mental health podcast. I want to keep those of you that are here for mental health reasons interested. But these lifestyle medicine techniques, they're just super cool because um, there's no adverse effects from this, right? So there's no adverse effects. It's all good stuff, and it has like so many things that help you. I mean, this can be a hobby. This can be a social activity. This can be um, something to get people moving and less sedentary. It's something to help them. It can become an educational thing. This has become, in many ways, one of the pillars of my life, and I center a lot of what I am and who I am around these lifestyle medicine techniques. So this is actually probably one of the things I'm most interested in. The good news is, I don't think I could make an entire podcast about this because it's not that hard, right? I mean, I could probably tell you in 10 minutes how to eat well, and that would be it. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth than that. We're going to have several episodes on it. There's going to be some repetition, but I think a lot of influencers and things online want you to think that it's more complicated than it is and that you need to take all these supplements and things. And I'm here to tell you, you don't need to do any of that. You can do this cheaply. You can do this um, more expensive. It depends on what you want to do, what you want to eat. You don't need to take a bunch of supplements. Um, we talked about some supplements in the depression lecture that I felt might help. Um, it's up to the individual and whether they want to try that or not, but at least there's some that have some evidence. I don't think this is a requirement, like you need to be on this kind of thing. All right. So, um, before I get into, so I kind of put this, I used to have integrative psychiatry lecture I got from actually when I was a resident. And so I've kind of built on a lot of the lectures I got in that. And so I wanted to talk about this idea of integrative psychiatry because I think it fits neatly into lifestyle medicine. So the idea of integrative psychiatry is that it's not just meds, it's a lot of stuff. And I think we often think about psychotherapy and psychopharmaceuticals, but there's more, right? So there's non pharmaceutical supplements, herbals like St. John's wort, or vitamins like vitamin D, minerals like magnesium, and there's others, right? Like NAC or something like that. So we've talked about a lot of this stuff. But then there's diet changes, right? So the foods that we eat. There is meditation, which is kind of a type of psychotherapy, but it is different. It's like mind body medicine, right? So yoga would be another one, but like that's also a type of exercise. So like exercise is also in there, and yoga could be a type of exercise. Tai chi, things like that. These are, you're stretching, you're meditating, you're exercising, you're doing a lot of things at once. These are really good things, and these can help your medical and mental health, right? Art therapy, right? And not just art therapy, but any kind of like thing where you're making something. It doesn't have to be, I think when people think art therapy, maybe they think about drawing, but it could be sculpting, it could be wood carving, it could be building a gazebo in your backyard, right? Like I feel like anything where you're like producing something and trying to make something functional and also pretty and like express yourself could be a part of what that is. Massage would be another one. And using essential, we talked about essential oils. I like essential oils. I think they're very affordable. Do they work, do they not work? Unclear, but I like them. If you like them, I say use them. So aromatherapy, you can combine massage with aromatherapy. And then acupuncture would be another one. I do auricular acupuncture. I'll probably talk about that at some point. um, and there's more, right? So integrative psychiatry would be the idea of kind of all these things. And I think most psychiatrists are hopefully good at the pharmaceutical piece. I would encourage them to be good at like the herbals and vitamins piece, because that is also something that people take into their bodies. And I think you should know about all this stuff, right? You should know about diet and exercise. Maybe you're not as proficient in therapy. Some are more proficient or less proficient in that. Maybe, art therapy, that's more of a specialized thing. But if it's something you're interested in, it's something that you could, build into what you do, right? So this is kind of the idea of integrative psychiatry. Um, I kind of think of this as it's kind of like functional medicine. And I'm, I'm very skeptical of functional medicine, obviously, or actually, it's kind of this idea that like what we're doing is like naturopathy, like modern medicine doesn't really work, and we have to figure out like the root cause, and like as if we're not trying to do that, and then come up with something that has no scientific evidence to work. But this stuff, we're talking about mental health. There's not, I mean, getting evidence on this stuff is tough to begin with. But I mean, I think after I read that list, most people would agree that they think that, I think most people would think that most of that stuff could be definitely beneficial, right? And it's also things that are just enjoyable. And I think if you're just getting out, you're socializing, you're enjoying yourself, that's good for mental health, right? Finding activities you like to do. Um, so next, so that's kind of the broad topic of integrative psychiatry, and then I want to break it down. So there's a subtopic of nutritional psychiatry. So this would be basically just focusing on kind of what you're taking into your body that are not pharmaceuticals, right? So it integrates nutrition into the standard treatment plan. So we're talking about, what foods are healthy and which ones aren't. And next episode, I'm going to talk about foods that are specifically, we know, have benefit in mental health. But I mean, they're beneficial for everything. But I'm aware that, there's some research to indicate that they may be specifically helpful in mental health. So there's this field, kind of an evolving field. There's a few folks out there that I know that are kind of the forefront of this. Um, One of them, she's Indian American. Her last name is Naidu. I think she has a culinary degree, and she's a psychiatrist. And then there's, I believe it's Chris Palmer. He does a lot with the ketogenic diet, but he also does things with just diet as a part of like treating mental health. So I'm going to talk about a lot of his stuff with the ketogenic diet, probably next time as well, because that has to do with mental health. And then also in nutritional psychiatry, so we're talking about dietary changes, but also supplements would be included in that as well. All right. And then kind of a broader topic than nutritional psychiatry would be the idea of lifestyle psychiatry. And and some people say they practice lifestyle psychiatry, and for me, lifestyle psychiatry and lifestyle medicine are the same thing, right? Like I feel like if you're a psychiatrist, you might call it lifestyle psychiatry, and if you're not, you might call it lifestyle medicine. But to me, these are kind of interchangeable because the things that you're doing are very similar. All right. So let's talk about, this is just an overview. There's generally 6 pillars to lifestyle medicine. I've expanded it to 2 more. So I have 8 pillars. Um, First is nutrition, so diet, what you eat. Second is movement, so that's like exercise. And just, I like the word movement because I think exercise has this connotation that, like, oh, I'm going to the gym or I'm going for a run, and maybe that's not what people want to do. But, movement could be, working in the garden or walking the dog, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to have that connotation of what we classically think of as exercise, but it's just kind of like, and it could be you're at work and instead of calling or emailing, you walk over to someone's office, or, you take a break in the middle of the day and take a 5-minute walk around the floor, right? Like I would do this frequently. I walked everywhere, take the stairs, right? So I like this idea of movement because it encompasses more. And the important thing is that we're moving around and we're not sedentary. All right. Next pillar is adequate sleep. And then next would be decreasing or eliminating toxins. And these toxins would be things like tobacco, but also I'd say vaping, so nicotine, alcohol, illicit substances. I think things like cannabis and mushrooms and psilocybin and everything are becoming more popular. I would generally say that these are probably not. It should not be our goal to introduce these things, and the goal would be to not take in toxins at all. Um, so I think that would be the goal of lifestyle medicine. I think you're going to find more health if you're consuming less of this kind of stuff, right? And I would also maybe put in here decreasing medications, because medications are, toxic, right? It's a cost benefit analysis. Like if you're going to get better versus, if you're going to get more benefit versus less downside on a medication, then you're going to want to take it. However, if you can change your lifestyle factors to the point where you don't need that medication and you can get rid of it, and then the benefit, the cost outweighs the benefit, and then you can eliminate it, I think that would be the goal, right? Just like kind of like with the cannabis, maybe some people do benefit from that. I think that's probably more people that are like getting end of life care, cancer, things like that, and not like your average person that's just trying to manage their stress and anxiety. um, it would be ideal not to use that and to use something else. But, if that's the only thing that works and it works for you, then perhaps that is an option for someone. Okay. I would also put in this toxin list trans fats. Those have been eliminated um, from the American food system, and I think most everywhere else as well. But there are some things like that. And then I've also kind of tentatively got in there like fructose, as an additive to food. I'm going to talk about fructose a lot when we talk about ultra processed foods. So we'll talk about like why I think that could be considered a toxin. All right, so that's 4 of our pillars. The next one would be stress management. So decreasing stress. This could be done through hobbies, doing things you enjoy, eliminating things that cause stress, mindfulness, lots of different things. And I think it's something that if you're doing therapy, helping someone manage stress could be a good goal of that therapy. And then the last typically listed pillar would be social connection and healthy relationships. So, being isolated, not the best thing, right? So we want to have social connection. We want to be around other people. We want to have good relationships with those people. So we want to, interact with people in a way that fosters healthy relationships. This is another type of therapy that you can work on with a therapist, where you're working on your relationships. So I think, managing stress is something to do in therapy that can be really helpful. And I think improving your relationships. Now, um, when when I go through these pillars in more detail, I will talk about nutrition and movement. I'll talk a little bit about decreasing toxins. I'm going to have a whole series on drugs and alcohol and tobacco at a later time. I will mention that one briefly. But as far as like the sleep, stress management, and social connection, I'm just bringing up those now, right? those are it would be harder to go for me to go into those in more detail now, but I just bring them up. So adequate sleep, you want to have the goal of getting the amount of sleep that you need. On average, that 6 to 8 hours. Some people don't need that much. Some people need more. So it's getting the amount of sleep that you need, that makes you rested, that makes you function during the day. And people, they don't get enough sleep. It's a real problem. Actually, probably the next series I go over is going to be over insomnia. And so I'm going to have an entire season on sleep and sleep medicine, which will probably be like 6 months. And so I'm not really going to go into it right now. And not just to say that this is one of the things that you want to be working on. And like I said, I'm going to have a whole couple of seasons on drugs and alcohol. And then stress management, social connection, I feel like that's more of a therapy topic, and that's not really what I go over. But, kind of keeping that in mind, that these are important things as well. And then to mention the last two pillars that I've added, that there are things I've heard talked about by people who talk about lifestyle medicine, and I wanted to just kind of call them out as their own kind of pillars and make my 8 pillars. One is being in nature. I know that it sounds kind of like really specific, right? Whereas these other things are more like, well, I mean, I eat, so we got to work on eating. Oh, I move around, let's work on that. But like specifically being in nature, it is so important. And the cool thing is when you combine these things, right? Say you go for a walk in the park with a loved one and have a picnic. Oh my gosh, look, you've done movement, you've done social connection, you've done being in nature, you've done nutrition, right? Maybe eliminating toxins if you're not having any junk, right? I mean, you can hit everything. And I think that's the goal, because like we don't have enough time, right? That's really I think a lot of people think about this and they're like, there's not enough time for this. I have all these things I have to do. And what you need to do is you need to take a look at your priorities. Is it more important that you're healthy, or that you're doing a bunch of this other stuff? Like I hear a lot of people say, well, my kids have all these activities, and it's like, do your kids need all these activities? Right? Like, and you're running around, you have no time for sleep, you have no time for yourself, you have no time for your spouse. I don't know. I mean, that's a personal decision. But the thing is, I think a lot of people, they 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 feel like what they have in their schedule is absolutely required. And what you have to realize is that almost none of that is. The fact that you go to work and make money and pay for things, that's absolutely required, right? Everything else is kind of up for grabs. And like what job you have and how you do that, there may be some options with that. And so, where you choose to live, you may be wasting hours in the car driving to and from work because you wanted to have a bigger house that you could afford that was further away. And now you're sacrificing sleep every day because of it, right? Maybe you choose to stay at the office extra long because you're trying to get a promotion that you don't even know if you're going to get. And because of that, you don't have time to go to the gym, right? So these are the kinds of things that you have to prioritize, right? And the thing is, if you're really stressed out and you're really not doing well and you're gaining weight and you're having this really unhealthy lifestyle and it's impacting your medical and your physical, your mental health, is that stuff worth it? Is it worth it to have this house that you wanted? Is it worth it to have this car? Is it worth it? Do you need this more money in this promotion? Is it worth it to have your kids in all these activities? Right? Like you have to take account of that. And you have to think to yourself, maybe I need to get more down to basics. Maybe I need to, like, because these things I'm listing, these are the important things. But the good news is you could try and combine things, right? Like I mentioned with the walk in the park, right? So try and do multiple pillars at the same time, and that will save you time and allow you to fit it in. Okay. And then I've got one more. My last pillar is continued education, right? So that's just, keeping yourself informed, keeping yourself educated, learning new things. Um, and this could be like hobbies or new hobbies, right? So improving things that are not things you have to do for work, working on. And anytime you're improving things, you're learning. And here's another hobby that I have. I like to cook. So I can learn how to cook more stuff. That's education. And then I'm also working on my diet at the same time, right? So now I've hit two of the pillars. And then I may be decreasing toxins by eating a healthier diet, right? So now um, I've gotten three of those. And then say a part of that is learning how to garden and grow my own vegetables. Well, now I'm educating myself and I'm in nature and I'm moving, right? You see how you can kind of take everything and wrap them up and make it simpler to hit them all at the same time, right? And then maybe I'm doing this with a partner and I'm cooking together with my kids, or I'm in the garden with my kids or something like that. And then you brought that aspect in there. And the thing is, if you're stressed out and you're not doing well, you have to ask yourself, is this really what you want to be doing with your life? All right? So these are the principles of lifestyle medicine. All right. So, with that, let's get started with nutrition. And I want to talk about um, kind of an intro to nutrition, kind of go over an overview of some of the big nutrition topics, and then we'll break them down further in the next few episodes where we talk about in our obesity series, right? So, first of all, what I want to get out there is that there is no correct diet. We don't necessarily know, do you have to eat this or you can't eat this? Um, it I'm going to give you a simplified version of like kind of what kind of stuff you should be thinking about adding to your diet versus getting out of your diet. But the research on this, it's just very complicated, right? So nothing about nutrition is simple. Um, with anything, we learn more all the time, but it's a complicated topic, right? And the thing is, it's very hard to study, right? Because oftentimes when they're doing nutrition research, they're testing like isolated nutrients, but the way an isolated nutrient works versus when it's included in the whole food is like almost never the same. And this topic will come up a lot. It's kind of like with fish oil. We have not seen a lot of benefit with fish oil supplements, but we do see benefit with eating fish. And of course, there's protein in the fish. There's other kinds of fats in the fish. There's other kind of vitamins. Um, and so it's when you just isolate that one thing that we think is good, like we know that omega-3 fatty acids are good, but when we distill it out and study it by itself, we just don't see a lot of benefit. But when we look at foods that are rich in omega-3s versus ones that aren't, we see the benefit, right? So two things to glean from this. One, eat the whole foods. Supplementing yourself with a million different supplements, you're missing something. And there's things that are in these foods that we don't even know is in there. And if we say, oh, well, these are all these good things we think are in there, and then we study them individually, or even like you could even group like five of them together or something, you may not see the benefit. But when you take the whole food in, there's something in there that is doing something for you. And the problem with ultra processed foods, in my view, is that what ultra processed foods have done is they take the foods, they break them up into all their little component parts, and then they put them back together in a way that's not natural. And in the process, you're losing stuff. Some of that stuff we know what it is. A lot of time it's fiber, and a lot of time we don't even know what we're losing. We know we're losing something, and it's gone because when they process the food, they're breaking it up into component parts. It's almost like I almost think of like a ultra processed food like a handful of supplements. Like, oh, there's some fish oil in here, and there's some carbs in here, and there's some amino acids in here, and there's some vitamin C in here, and it's like, okay, well, I'm getting all those individual things, but what am I not getting? I'm not getting fiber. I'm not getting phytonutrients. I'm not getting certain vitamins and minerals. Maybe the way they've been processed, my body can't use them. Even if it's in there, my body can't use it the same. So there's that problem. And then there's the other problem of like studying this. It's hard to study salmon. because not all salmon are the same. There's different types of salmon. They have different fat contents. And when you do research, you have to do something that's very precise. And so it's very hard to do nutrition research. And so I'm going to tell you the best of what I know, and I think it'll make sense to you all. I think you'll be like, yeah, I think what he's saying makes a lot of sense. All right. So when you're reading nutrition literature, remember that this is another thing. They often do studies on mice, and it's like, or pigs, or cows, or primates, or us. And it's like, how it works in one of these creatures is not necessarily how it works in us. And then if it's studied in healthy people, but not sick people, that's going to be a difference. And if it's not studied in women, which we often don't, um, then we're going to miss out on whatever that is, uh, whatever we would have learned had we done that. Um, so you have to take these research things with a grain of salt, because a lot of them will make things sound like they're really, really amazing and you have to include them in your diet, but then it doesn't really do anything for you. And then something else may show no benefit, but it actually is working. So I'm going to do my best to talk to you about how to do this right. So, next, take a dietary history, right? So that makes sense, right? You're talking to someone about their diet. You need to find out what they eat, right? So start with specific questions, and frequency, typical meals, quantity, like what are you eating? How often do you eat it? How much of it do you eat? Things like that. Questions about eating habits, foods preferred or enjoyed, typical meals and snacks, amounts, digestive function. How much are they going to the bathroom? Are they having problems with that? Do they have, pain, bloating, things like that? Um, so there's a lot to kind of take in, and then suspected deficiencies or insufficiencies can be identified and later confirmed through specific diagnostic testing. So if something's coming up and you're like, oh, I think they may not be getting enough of that, you might want to order it, right? Especially if they have the symptoms of that deficiency, or if you've done kind of a standard blood test and it's like, oh, I think their iron might be low because they appear anemic, right? So these are all you want to kind of get an idea, but the problem is most people don't really understand how they eat. They think they eat less than they do, and they think they eat better than they do. And so that can be the challenge, right? And then one more kind of topic would be the idea of mindful eating. So many of you may know what mindfulness is. It's kind of this idea where you're aware of what's going on, right? So for those of you that don't know, mindfulness would be like, listen, what do you hear? Do you hear a bird chirping? Focus in on that. Just hear that one sound. Try to block everything out. Focus on that. Think about what's going on right now, not what you did earlier, not what you're gonna do. Like what does this part of your body feel like right now? Where is this in space? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you see? Maybe close your eyes so that you can focus on what you're hearing and smelling, um, and things like that, right? So, and I think to a lot of people this may sound silly, but like it really can help. And training yourself to become more mindful, just in general, keeping yourself in the present moment, is something that tends to help with mental health. And so, right here, I'm kind of importing this idea of mindfulness into eating, right? So just doing those mindful techniques, but with eating. So how might you do that? All right. So first would be kind of slowing down, right? So take a moment of gratitude, feel thankful that you have what you have. This doesn't have to be either, this could be in the form of a prayer, or grace or something like that. If that's something that you practice or is familiar to you, it doesn't have to be that. It just kind of an idea that you're grateful that you're able to have this, and you can imagine that other people haven't, maybe you haven't in the past, and that it's just it's a good thing, a positive thing that you're able to have this meal, right? Don't pick up your silverware right away. Take a deep breath before you eat, right? So we're just like slowing things down. Pause after a few bites to take a breath, right? So just kind of going slower, and then chewing thoroughly, you know, chewing it more, right? And the thing is, if you eat slower, you will probably eat less. There's been studies on chopsticks. It takes longer to eat food with chopsticks, even if you're like a pro. And they found that, and I don't know how much this has to do with, maybe why East Asians have lower body weights on average. I don't know if the chopstick thing factors into that or not. I mean, I would think so, because these studies have basically showed if you eat with chopsticks, you eat slower, and if you eat slower, you eat less. So even if you're not eating with chopsticks, and you might want to think about eating with chopsticks, it's like that might help you eat slower, right? Um, but this kind of slowing down, what happens is it takes like, I think like 20 minutes or something like that for your stomach to get the message to your brain that there's enough food in there. And so if you eat super, super fast, you will eat more than you needed and not know it yet. And I think this is a problem in our school system, especially in the United States. I'm hearing that kids are getting like 20 minutes to eat. Um, it's just not enough time. You know, what they're eating is one of the most important things that they do in their life. And to just kind of like squish that into 20 minutes, and then a lot of that time they're standing in line getting their food, and then they might be last in line, and then they have almost no time to eat. It's absolutely ridiculous. I had an hour in high school. I think before that it was less. I remember I had time to eat my food and talk and have recess. And now it seems like people don't get any of that. So it's like we've kicked out, we've kicked out socializing, we've kicked out exercise, we've kicked out diet. Like we're training kids it, without the lifestyle stuff. And a lot of people think that there's worse results in a lot of aspects of what's going on. And I think that cutting out recess and cutting out lunchtime is a big problem. Um, so this whole idea of like, and then you're training people to eat fast because they don't have time for it. And then what, they're going to eat fast for dinner, they're going to eat fast the rest of their lives. And they just kind of learn that that's the way they're supposed to do it. And the faster you eat, the more you eat. If you go slower, you get that message that you're full, and you don't eat as much. So I think mindful eating is really important. And those are the ways I would kind of approach it. Just slow down, take breaths, chew thoroughly. In a lot of cultures, I know especially like Spanish culture, for one, they have very long meals where they talk to each other, and it's very slow, and they're a relatively healthier population, I would say, than the United States are. I think they have a better diet. I think they have more socialization. I think they move around a bit more, and I think those are really important. All right. So moving on with mindful eating, some other things that you could do to improve your mindful eating: make something you've never made before. I think just the idea of like having something different in there, it makes you more like aware of what it is. Feel those food textures, in your mouth. How is it different? How does it stimulate your taste buds, right? Like how is this different? I mean, a lot of people, they want to eat the same things all the time, and partly because they don't like anything else, partly because they don't have time. But make time, right? Make food from scratch. Do it with friends and family. Try new ingredients in foods. Make subtle changes to recipes that you're already doing. Make find a recipe that's the exact same dish. If you like pasta with tomato sauce, try a different type of pasta. Make your own tomato sauce from scratch. Find different recipes for tomato sauce. This is something I always enjoy doing. It's like, oh, let's do an arrabbiata, or let's do a puttanesca, or let's do a bolognese, right? So it's like there's all these different sauces, and why not just explore them all? Hey, why don't I throw carrots in this time, even though I've never seen that done? That could be different, right? So just kind of making changes using, let's get try a new herb and throw that in there and see what happens. Um, and then just growing your own food in general. And something really easy that literally takes almost no time is sprouts. You can sprout just about anything, and you can buy sprouting seeds on the internet. Broccoli sprouts. It's not. I think people think of bean sprouts, but like there's alfalfa sprouts. There's broccoli sprouts, and they don't even taste like broccoli. Like I don't like broccoli, but broccoli sprouts don't taste like broccoli. They're just tiny little sprouts of the plant that's going to turn into it. And you buy these seeds, and you get a big jar. I use these kimchi jars that I've had these kimchi jars forever. I got all these big jars of kimchi like 15 years ago, and I kept they're nice glass jars, good size, round, fat, and you put the seeds in there, and you cover it with water. You let it soak for a day. You drain it and redo the water, and then after like a day or two, you don't have them in the water. You basically rinse them with water, and you have like a cheesecloth over the top, and then you drain out the water, and then it's just moist, and you kind of spread the seeds around the sides of the jar, and then just do that once a day, and then fill it with water, get everything wet, drain it out, kind of evenly distribute it, let it sit on the counter, and you do that for 5 to 7 days, and you will have some of the healthiest food that you can ever imagine. And you didn't need a garden for it, you didn't need an outdoors for it. It just grows right there on your countertop, and it's super healthy. Herbs are another one. You can grow herbs inside, but like herbs don't take up a lot of space. They're super easy to grow. If you've got a windowsill or a porch or anything, you don't need to put them in the ground. You can just have them in pots. You know, you don't have to grow them from seeds. Just grab some basil and thyme, rosemary, oregano, whatever you like, mint, put them in some containers and grow them, and just make sure you water them. And like I've got a basil plant that's about 6 feet tall, literally. They turn into like trees. They get a woody stem on them. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen giant rosemary bushes, but you can a lot of these herbs like cilantro, parsley are non-woody stems, so they will pass away. They will die eventually. But I always take the leaves from the outside of a plant like parsley or cilantro, because the new ones come from the middle. So instead of cutting the entire plant down and just using it all at once, just leave the plant alive, pick the leaves off the outside, use those leaves. New ones will keep coming. Eventually, it will flower and it'll die. But things like rosemary and thyme and oregano and basil can like literally live forever if it if they don't go through a freeze or some sort of like bad weather. Rosemary doesn't like too much water, but and it's fun to learn about these things. And you grow your own herbs. It's Herbs can be kind of pricey at the store, but if you grow them yourself and you can just buy the plants. So I think that's a great part about mindful eating and just including more plants in your diet in general. Okay. So this next part I want to go over is the idea of like intake, right? Like how much to eat and how to control how much you eat, right? So this is something that would be more about like losing weight, right? So calorie restriction. That's kind of the first step, okay? Um, Whenever we talk about how to like, actually missed this. I wanted to talk about this at the beginning. I wanted to talk about the obesity treatment pyramid. Okay. So the bottom level of that would be this multi component intensive behavioral intervention with a goal weight loss of 2 to 5%. Next step up would be prescriptive nutritional intervention. So that's meal replacements, intermittent fasting, specific diet. That's what I'm talking about right now in the episode. 5 to 10% weight loss. Then we move up to pharmacotherapy. These are people that need a bit more help. They need a 5 to 20% weight loss. These are folks with, BMIs over 30 or over 27 with comorbidities. And then, and that's things like the GLP-1s. And we're going to talk about all these drugs later. And then endoscopic procedures. There's balloons that you can actually have blown up inside your stomach so that it'll feel more full. I don't do this, but I will talk about it towards the end of this series. 10 to 20% weight loss goal. And then there's bariatric surgeries or other types of surgeries. We'll talk about that briefly. I'm not a surgeon, but I can tell you about what's out there. This would be folks generally with higher BMIs, over 40, over 35 with comorbidities, 20 to 40% weight loss goal. So we're starting right now down at the prescriptive nutritional interventions, right? That's what I'm talking. That's what I'm going to be talking about. That's the lifestyle medicine stuff, and then we'll move on to the pharmacotherapy after we talk about this, and then I'll briefly talk about endoscopic and surgery, all right? Because that is not something I am an expert at. So going back to what I was talking about before, um, the intake recommendation. So the first step, and this doesn't, everyone feels like they've done this, but I'd like you to give it a go with more structure. Okay, so it's calorie restriction. This is actually how everything works. So everything, all these weight loss techniques, all work through calorie restriction. It's just a matter of how we're doing it. Are we taking a drug that makes us not want to eat? Are we cutting out a part of our stomach that makes it to where we can't eat as much because there's not enough as much space for it? Are we having this endoscopic balloon? There's not as much space, um, or are we just not eating as much through our own willpower? Okay, which is the hardest, but it's also the safest and the cheapest. So, and it's what should definitely be tried first. In fact, in order to get on a lot of these medications, the prior authorization to get them approved, you have to have tried this for 6 months, right? Most people have. But have they tried it correctly? Probably not. So let's talk about calorie restriction. Um, you probably, or you might be surprised, but you have to restrict quite a bit. For an average size person that's on like a 2,000 to 2,500 kilocalorie diet, you're going to have to perhaps get down to 800 to 1,200 kilocalories a day, which sounds like a huge change, and it is. Before you may see a difference, your body does not want to lose fat, really wants to hold on to it. You have to starve it, which means you're starving yourself, right? And a lot of people, they may worry, oh, what if I'm not getting the right nutrients and stuff? Your body makes most of the nutrients you need, and your fat is storing a lot of these nutrients, and you're still going to be eating. Okay, like the nutrients you need to worry about are the ones that don't have calories: vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals that are in plants with very little calories. Most of the calories that you're restricting are going to be in the form mostly of carbohydrates and fat, and maybe a little bit of protein, but probably less on the protein front, right? Um, there's no amount of carbs that you need to survive. You don't need carbs. Your body can make all the carbs that you need. So you don't need to worry that you're restricting carbs. You're not losing any kind of nutrition here. You're just losing calories. As far as fat's concerned, your body can make almost all fats. Can't make them all, but if you've got a bunch of fat stored in you, it's already there. And so you don't need to take more. That stored fat can be used. And then protein, your body can make proteins. It can't make all proteins. You need to make sure you're getting enough proteins. Um, and protein has the lowest calories of all three of those, and it also makes you the most full. So it's the one that I would be the least worried about. And so if you're eating a lot of plants and that have all the nutrients that you need, you don't need to worry about like not having the nutrition. All you're doing is cutting energy, and you have that energy stored on your body. So restricting your diet to 1,200 calories a day is not going to cause you to get malnutrition if you're still eating a healthy diet, because you're still eating, right? Um, and think about something like celery. Celery has, from what I hear, negative calories in it. It actually takes your body more energy to chew it and break it down than it contains. And so you're going to be wanting to eat more vegetables, and they contain very little calories. All right. So the good rule of thumb is you want a 500 kilocalorie deficit. So that would be how many calories do you need to maintain the weight that you're at right now, and cut that by 500 a day. And we don't want to go lower than 800 to 1,200 a day. That's kind of our minimum. You know, 800 for a smaller person, 1200 for a bigger person. We don't want to go too much, and we don't want to lose weight too fast. Okay? It's very difficult to do this, but there are some techniques that can help. And you probably heard of these: intermittent fasting, alternate day fasting, time restricted feeding. All right? Let's talk about how to do these appropriately. So, first, um, probably the best thing to do, I think the easiest one to do, is to limit your eating to 10 to 12 hours per day. Some people do more, some people limit it to 6 to 8 hours. So, basically, what this is um, you stop eating, we'll just say 8 p.m. And then if you're going to limit eating to 10 to 12 hours a day, that means that you could eat at 8 to 10 o'clock the next day, right? But it's different for every person. They've generally found that stopping eating earlier in the evening is better, but doing something is better than nothing. I like to eat later, and I don't really care about the morning. For me, it's much easier to not eat until like 12 or 1 o'clock and stop eating at like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. than it is to do it the other way, where I stop eating at like 6 or 7 p.m. and then I eat at like 8 the next morning. Um, my guidance would just be figure out what hours work the best for you. If you can, and it's generally better to quit eating earlier in the day rather than wait longer the following day. But either way, I say is good. Um, in general, limiting yourself to 12 hours a day versus 10 is a good option just for everyone. It's just a healthy way to eat, to have a 12-hour fast every day. Now, if you're trying to lose weight, you may want to have the 14-hour fast, which would be like limiting to 10 hours a day, or a 16-hour fast, or something like that. But I would have that more as a temporary goal, right? You may want to restrict your eating a little bit more while you're trying to lose the weight. And once you've lost it, to maintain that weight loss, go with a 12-hour fast. Okay, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, right? So getting too restricted on your eating time um, is not healthy or helpful, but it could help with weight loss short term. So I wouldn't recommend, an 8-hour eating window or a 6-hour eating window for the rest of your life. But if you do it for 6 months or something while you're trying to lose weight, and you've kind of gone over it with your doctor or whatever, I would say that's fine. It's not a good long-term strategy. I think once you've kind of gotten things under control and things are going the direction you want them to go, you can have that eating window a little bit bigger. I generally, personally, I fast about 12 to 13 hours a day. And so I have about an 11 to 12-hour eating window. And I'm a healthy weight, and that's what I do to maintain a good metabolism in general, right? Um, and now weight loss will take at least a month. So don't, it might be faster, but if it's not, you have to keep consistent with this. This is a long-term strategy, right? So the other good thing is, I was talking to you, you're like wondering, why am I doing it if I say I'm a healthy weight? Well, the good news is this actually has health benefits beyond weight loss. So fasting induces a cleanup in our bodies that maintains healthy functioning. You get reduced inflammation, especially in the gut. You get improvements in immunity, mood, anxiety, energy, and decreased appetite. And it leads to healthier gut microbiome, right? Giving your gut a time to rest where it can kind of like, you know, be itself without having food in there is good for it. It's healthy for the bacteria that are living in your body. It's healthy for your body to not have to have food constantly in it. And also, it can help. There's some research that show that it can help with cancer, because if you're starving your cells, the ones that are like maybe potentially going to turn into cancer in the future get starved and die, and we have to make new ones, right? Cancer cells are very hungry cells, and so if they get starved out, they may die before they turn into cancer. So that's why I think that the time restricted feeding is a good option, right? Um, so moving on, um, if inconsistent in fasting, it could worsen your weight and health, right? So if you're going to do this technique, you need to do it right. Don't just like do it sometimes and then not other times, and like you're doing this kind of binge purge type of thing. This is not healthy. It's like, well, I'm going to eat as much as possible and then I'm not going to eat it all for a couple of days to punish myself. And you know, this is a actually a DSM disorder now. This binge eating disorder, and binge purging is, and purge does not necessarily just mean that you're vomiting. It could be that you're exercising or you're starving yourself or something like that. And that could, you know, that's considered bulimia. It doesn't have to be a vomiting. I mean, there's also taking laxatives that cause you to poop out everything, but it could just be exercise and starvation as your purge. This is not healthy behavior to binge and purge, right? We want to eat healthily and normally during our eating window and then fast during our fasting window. This is not a accelerator to the max and a brakes, right? This is a consistent healthy pattern. Um, and you may find this uncomfortable. However, most people do adjust after a few days. So give it time and see how you adjust. It's a little, like I said, it's a little bit better to have an earlier eating window than later, but later is typically easier for most people. And then during your fasting time, there are things that you should have, and that's water. And it would also be other liquids that don't contain calories. So that would be coffee and plain tea. Um, that's you can't even put lemon in the tea, right? That's it's you need to be completely fasted. You need to completely rest your gut. Um, and water, coffee, plain tea are the things that you can have during the fasting time. Um, and there are different ways of doing this. As I mentioned, I like time restricted feeding because I don't feel like I'm starving myself to just fast for a certain period of time every day, but basically just skip breakfast or have a late lunch or something. And some people, maybe it's like you get rid of the late night snacks, but then you get breakfast, whichever you prefer. Um, the alternate day fasting, this is one where, you know, maybe you eat normally on one day, but then you have like a day with fasting on the next day and you switch back and forth. I personally don't prefer this because um, to me it feels more like I'm going to dread those days because they're going to be more severe. Maybe I only get one meal on those days. I don't want to have to deal with that. I would prefer to have a consistent eating window that's the same every day that I can be used to. There are some free apps out there to help you do this, and I encourage you to use it because it's hard for people to just kind of do it until you get used to it, until it becomes your habit. Um, one app is called Lose It. You can find other ones, um, and then there are like as I mentioned, there are medications that can also help with calorie restriction, and we will talk about those later. Next, I want to talk about a specific type of um, intermittent fasting that I'm really excited about. And this is not just for weight loss, this is for everyone once again. And it's the FMD diet, otherwise known as the fasting mimicking diet. And so you're actually like not necessarily fasting, but you're mimicking a fast, right? And this has been dubbed the longevity diet. So it's been found that, you know, you're more likely to live a longer, healthier life if you do this diet. It was studied by Dr. Walter Longo. So if you want to look up this diet, search fasting mimicking diet, search Walter Longo. Um, I've 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 looked at his stuff. I'm going to tell you about it right now, but like, go get that stuff and look in detail if you wish. So what this diet, I'll tell you how to do it, but I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of it first. It can help to trigger cellular and metabolic changes that are similar to fasting. It increases something called autophagy, which is, you know, auto means like self and phagy means eat. So like basically you're eating yourself. And it's basically your cells are cleaning themselves up. and the old nasty cells that we don't want around anymore get destroyed, right? So it also improves insulin sensitivity. It can help to reduce biological age, get improvements in metabolic health, improve your immune system. And so it's a lot of the same stuff I already talked about, but this is like a more specific diet. And to me, this diet has the most scientific information on it. And so now I will tell you how to do this diet. So it is a primarily plant-based diet. So it's mostly vegetarian. However, it does include the option for omega-3 rich fish no more than 2 to 3 times a day. So we're not really eating beef, chicken, pork with this diet. We're doing mostly plants and a little bit of fish. There's a 12-hour eating window. So 12-hour fast, 12-hour eating window. Talked about that before. And then this is, so in addition to being a plant-based diet with a 12-hour eating window, it contains a 5-day fast. And I'm going to describe to you how this 5-day fast works. So on day one of the 5-day fast, and I've got fast in quotation marks because it's not a traditional fast in that you're not eating at all. All right. That's why this is called a fasting mimicking diet. So on day one, you will take in 40 to 50% of your normal calorie intake, which for most people would be around 1,100 calories a day. And then on days 2 through 5, and I've even heard that you could do this for 3 days instead of 5. So it's 3 to 5 days. 5 days being recommended, but you could do a 3 to 5 day fast. If you can't, 5 is too much, try 4. So on these subsequent days 2 through 3 to 5, you will then be having 10 to 20% of your normal calorie intake, which is going to be around 800 calories. Now, we already talked about calorie restriction being around an 800 to 1,200 calories diet. And the good news here is we don't have to do this every day. We're just doing it during our fasting time, during this 5-day fast. So you do this 40 to 50% of your normal calorie intake on day one and 10 to 20% on days 2 through 3 to 5. And then you'll have a macronutrient ratio of 10% protein, 45% fat, and 45% carbs during the fasting time period, right? And then, this is the good news, you only need to do this fast 2 to 4 times a year for healthy weight individuals. If you're trying to lose weight, you can do it up to 12 times a year, so once a month. So I think a lot of people do like these long fasts, like every week or something. If you're trying to lose weight under this diet, you're doing the time restricted eating of 12-hour eating window, but you're only doing the 5-day fasting, the mimicking fast. You're only doing that once a month. And if you're at a healthier weight, just kind of for the longevity and the health benefits of this, you're only needing to do it 2 to 4 times a year. To me, out of everything I've ever seen, this to me is the ideal diet. If you're trying to do like the ideal diet, to me, this is it. You've got the primarily plant-based diet with fish. You've got the 12-hour eating window, and you've got a fast 2 to 4 times a year. I mean, and you only have to do the fast 2 to 4 times a year once you've got to the weight that you want to be at. And I mean, how to do that fast with like the percents and the macronutrient ratios, that's probably going to take some effort, maybe some coaching. But I just throw this out here to kind of say, from my personal opinion, I've read about a lot of diets, and to me, this one, I think for most people, now I don't want to say for everyone, for some people, different diets are different for different people. Some people want to have more meat in their diet. Some people want to have more fish in their diet. Some people want to have only vegetables in their diet. So, none of this is a one size fits all. And he actually has a diet, if you look for pregnant women that do a fasting mimicking diet, because, pregnant women probably eat too much on average, and they probably think that it's completely fine to do that. And it is important that they get more, that they not follow this plan, that theirs would be more permissive. But I think people think they have this idea that, oh, I can eat as much as I want when I'm pregnant. And then what happens is they can't get that metabolic health back in order once they've given birth. And so he's actually got a diet specifically for pregnant women. I can't remember if there were any other specific patient populations that he had, but I did remember there was one specifically for pregnant women. So if you're pregnant, you can fast, you can do time restricted eating, but it is a different window. It is a different ratio. Go look up this diet and see what it says. Okay. Now, I want to wrap up this episode with, let's see. You know what? I think I want to go into this. We've reached about the hour mark. I'm going to save some of this other stuff for next time. I'm going to talk about what foods I think are good versus which ones you should avoid. I think we haven't really talked about that yet, and so I'm going to get to that next time, because I think it's going to take a while. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that you're excited to learn about lifestyle medicine and teach it to others, to practice it yourself, and that you feel like you learned something new, and that there's stuff on the horizon that you're like really excited to find out about. Let's see, the song that I'm gonna do today. Let's see, what song is today's song. I think what I'm gonna do is the song "Work for Food" by Pinhead Gunpowder. And this is actually a side project of Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day. I don't know if this band is still active, but back when I was listening to Green Day, like over 30 years ago, he had this side project, him and one of the other members. I think it's everyone but the drummer. The other guitarist is in Pinhead Gunpowder. And this song's called "Work for Food." We're talking about food today. Makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's a great song, and that's a great band. And thank you for joining me today. And I hope to see you next time.